Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the PRESSfeed webinar. And this webinar is about the Google Panda 4.0 update and how it has been affecting news content. And I have with me today as a guest presenter, Doug Brown from Newswire. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you for giving us your time and your viewpoint. So I'm just going to jump right in and get started. If I can get the slide to move, that would be a really exciting thing. There we go. Okay, so what is Panda 4.0, first of all? Well, a while ago, there was the first Panda algorithm update that Google did, and it was the first major change to Google's algorithm that we've had in many years. They tweak it all the time, but Panda was one of the first really big changes. And the focus of it was really on the quality of the content. Now, Google has been very open and upfront about what they want in terms of content. What do they rank? What are they looking for? And they have always said that they want really good, relevant content that matches what people are searching for. And this makes total sense. Google is not there to serve us. They're there to serve the people who search on Google and are looking for information. So obviously Google wants to give them the best results possible so that they keep coming back and keep using the Google search engine. And over the years, Google has said to companies, this is what works, this is what we rank, this is what we think is good, this is what we think is not good, this is what we don't want you to do. And after all these years, the industry really didn't self-regulate, so eventually the Google spam team just said, okay, we're now going to hit you with a big stick. It's a bamboo stick, and here comes Panda. So that's been going on for a while, and this was now the next update that was a really big one. And Matt Cutts, who's the senior search spam engineer at Google, said that this is not a tweak, it's not just a little change, it's another big major update. And the point of it was to improve the search results, which is always Google's main aim. And they talk about eliminating what they call thin content from the search results. And in a video, Matt Cutts explained that thin content is content that has little or no added value. Doug, you want to jump in and say something about that?
Well, I think that you're right on, and I don't want to jump ahead of you here, but the rest of it was, and what we found relevant is they're starting to, or especially with this update, they're trying to find out and give results that are relevant based on the site, so to speak. So in other words, when you wouldn't expect to be advertised a health supplement on a news site, or you wouldn't expect to find the best information about dieting necessarily on a news site, or about payday loans, or about any of the other things that somehow in a lot of the sites crept in there as news content. So that's one of the things that we found relevant and really an effect is the things that were legitimate press releases about legitimate news, about legitimate companies, did better, if anything, after Panda 4. The things that were thin and the things that were advertorials is one of the words that Cutts uses sometimes. The things that were advertorial in nature, in other words, really just promoting a product rather than having any sort of news content, seemed to be what got hurt worse in Panda 4.
Very good. So this was a phrase that's been used in many of the blog posts, that it caused pandemonium for the newswires. which I thought was quite cute. And you can see on the right-hand side here that for several of them, date coincident with the Panda update, their traffic just went over a cliff. And here you can see PR Newswire. And this is PR Web. Doug, are you typing?
Yeah, I just typed a little note trying to be discreet here, telling you that the screen isn't advancing.
That's fine. Oh, the slides are not advancing?
They're not for me anyway.
Wow, let me check the comments here and see. Not seeing any changes. Why is that?
There, it just changed for me.
Thank you very much. Okay. There they go. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. So let's just go back and get you to see that. Thank you very much. So, pandemonium for the newswires. There you go. You can see on the right-hand side how the traffic dropped off. And here you can see PR Newswire with a big drop. And PR Web, an even bigger one. So that is interesting. There is a difference between how an individual press release has performed after the update and the actual news site. Because bear in mind that a newswire site can tend to have an awful lot of content on it, as Doug was just saying. Some of it may be very thin. So that's one of the things. But if you, this is Newswire, this is Doug's wire service that I love to distraction, as I'm sure everybody who reads my blogs and comes to my webinars will know by now. But do you want to tell us what's been happening at Newswire with your traffic?
Yeah, it's remained virtually unchanged, as you can see. Now, the one thing that I would tell you is that if we looked at it over a 2-year period of time, we've generally been in an up trend every month. So what you're looking at there is a little bit of a flattening, which would, which is not generally what I expect to see. So I would say that we have been affected a little bit, but not to the degree that some of these other people have. And I think that the reason is we just are more diligent about the content that we have. So we had much less of that thin content, much less that was advertorial in nature, and so that's why we survived better than they did. So again, like you pointed out, all those numbers are just the amalgamation of tens of thousands of articles that are on Newswire and maybe hundreds of thousands that are on PR Web. So my analysis is, and we've gone through and done a more granular analysis, is that to the extent we had bad content, it was hit just as hard as it was everywhere else. We just had a lot less bad content.
Right. So just looking at why is search so important to PR people. And I would like to just bring to your attention again, if you maybe haven't seen this quote or perhaps had forgotten about it, in the State of the Media report done by Pew Research every year, they made this statement that search is the one factor that most influenced the news business in the past decade. That was in 2011. So they were looking at 10 years prior. Their prediction going forward, and we're already 3 years into the next decade, was that the sharing of news is going to be the one factor that will be the most influential going forward. But search is the one that just disrupted the whole thing. So whether your news content ranks well in search is, in fact, incredibly important. The other thing to remember is that once a press release is in the search engines, it's there forever and ever and ever and another day. The old way of faxing them, emailing them, maybe having them appear in print or even on TV or radio, they're there and they're gone. But with the internet, you have that immediacy and you have the long term. So it's kind of like somebody kept all their newspapers they'd ever had forever, and every time they thought about something, they could go and easily look in that huge pile of newspapers, and suddenly that one press release that you sent out 5 years ago would pop up again. That's why search is different, and that's why it's so important. And we've had many instances that we can quote where a journalist that was not known to a particular brand or company was researching a story about a particular topic, did a search on Google, and the stat is that 98% of all journalists start writing their story by doing a Google search. And my friend Rebecca Lee, who at that stage was editor of ClickZ, said, rolled her eyes and said, oh yeah, and the other 2% were on vacation. But what happens is that a journalist will do a search, and suddenly this press release, which could be a day old, a week old, or 5 years old, can show up, and then they can say, oh, I didn't know about that company, this looks really interesting. They follow the links, they come to your newsroom, they see all your content, and you might get interviewed for that. So that's one of the reasons why it's really vital that you must make sure that you know what Google is up to, what they want, what they don't want, what they're allowing, what they're disallowing. Anything to say on that, Doug?
I couldn't have said it any better. That's exactly right.
Okay. So it wasn't just the wire sites. It was individual press releases as well. So this again is going to depend on the quality of your content. As Doug says, they police their press releases really carefully at Newswire, and it's going to depend on whether you have real news or not as to whether your press release is going to show up. So this company, SEMrush, did a study, and they showed that even specific press releases that had been on page 1 are no longer now on page 1 for their keywords. So here's one example. This is a company, ahrn.com, and when you search their brand name, there was a press release on the left in red. You can see it highlighted. It was on page 1 for a search for their brand name, and now when you do it, it's no longer there. That press release has disappeared. Have you seen anything like that, or are you confident that your press releases are still showing up well, Doug?
Well, again, it just depends on the release. And by the way, the example that you're showing there may or may not be as a result of Panda. So you know, you'd have to look into it deeper and really find out why. But there are times, you know, there's something that is commonly called the Google Shuffle. I don't know if you've ever heard that term or if that means anything to anybody, but Google will bounce stuff around. So things that are on the first page sometimes will disappear entirely, only to show up in the same spot a day or two later or a week or two later. That's especially true when people are attempting to do kind of search engine optimization for the releases. So the best thing to do is just to have a steady strategy and to keep doing the same thing week in and week out and day in and day out. The thing that Google seems to notice is that, and what they'll do a lot of times is they'll take something and take it out of, you know, somehow reduce it and see if there's a pattern change, if it still behaves the way that it used to. So for example, people that are having artificial views going towards a press release, sometimes if the press release pops off of the first page, Google would expect that the views would go down to just about 0 because people aren't finding it in, you know, in search results anymore. If it still happens to miraculously have clicks from search results, then they know that something's up. So they do that a lot to kind of test and see what's going on. So the good old Google Shuffle means that things move around a lot, and the best practice for everyone is just to have kind of a program that you do and a program that you stick with, and to keep the program going regardless of how things are ranking, because in the long term, if you provide good content and you do it correctly, it will rank and it will show up.
Cool. So what does this Panda 4.0 mean for us in PR? Well, as Doug was just saying, if your strategy relies only on press releases on a wire service and they're all stuffed with links and that's thin content and it's basically advertorial, it's time to hit that panic button. But if you really have a good long-term strategy, then you're going to be fine. You just need to write great content. As PR people, we should know how to write a really good press release. Don't get sidetracked by, I need to do this and I need to do that and I've got to put 10 keywords in here and 8 links there. Just write a good press release. Katz has said, we know what the PR business is about. We understand press releases. We know that when they're good and they have real value, they do get picked up. So Google understands that. They can see when that's happening. But they also know when it's being manipulated or it's being syndicated. And this is one of the reasons why a couple of months ago they put out a post and a statement on Google Webmaster to say that they regard press releases as owned content, which actually does make sense. Although for all these years we've been doing press releases, sending them to the media. If the media picks them up and uses it, we regard it as earned content. But it was a very different procedure. The public never saw those press releases. They were written for the media only. When you put it on a newswire, it only went to a newsroom. There was no place for the public ever to see that content. So the actual press release never got seen. What was in the press release may have prompted a journalist to write something, and then, yes, it does become earned content, and Google really likes that. They give a lot of brownie points and Google juice to earned content. They really do. But now that when you put it on a newswire, it goes into Google News and Yahoo News, and it's public and it's seen by everybody, it actually is a piece of content that you wrote and you paid to have distributed into the public domain. So it is, in fact, owned content. That means Google sees a press release as an ad. So you've got to be really, really careful in what content you put in there. If it's in any way advertorial looking, it's not going to rank. They know what is news and what isn't news, and they will downgrade your releases if they're thin. So no secrets. We do know they want content that's relevant to the search term. Remember, their whole game is to give good content to the people who are searching. And that content must be fresh and it must be original. That's what they rank. So it's no longer about hitting the most people. It's not about necessarily being on the page 1 of Google for 3 terms. It's not about necessarily being on the first page of the Wall Street Journal even. When you're talking about Google, you're trying to get to the right audience with the right message, not the biggest audience. And that's what Google is looking for. Great content relevant to what Joe is searching for right now. Doug, comments?
I couldn't have said it any better. That's exactly right. You need to make sure that you have good content. Is that's the theme that we're going to hit again and again here. Is Google is I like the way you started the whole thing out, Sally. I mean, the bottom line is Google's business only works if they're providing relevant results for a searcher. So you have to make sure that your results are relevant. If you want to be ranked for that term, you have to have content that is relevant to that term. If you're trying to cheat the system or shortcut that system, they're doing a better and better job of catching up with us. So
Absolutely.
it's all about content.
Yeah. You know, I go to a lot of search conferences. I used to speak at what was then Search Engine Strategies. It's now ClickSee Live. And it's a bit broader, but at that stage it was very focused on search. And we would always see the Google representative sitting in the back taking notes and going, aha, they figured that out, did they? Oh, they're doing that. And then in the next month or so, we'd see the little changes happening in Google. So this is Tom Feremsky, and he was originally a Financial Times reporter. He is the founder of Silicon Valley Watcher. He was the guy who, all those years, 8 years ago now, wrote that blog post called Die, Press Release, Die. If you want to look him up, you can just do a search for Die, Press Release, Die. You'll find that original post that he wrote saying that you can't write press releases and news content the way that you did. He wrote it in, I think, 2006. And so he has been a commenter on this progression over the years. And this was his comment on Panda 4.0, just saying that Google sees us, PR firms and other marketing companies, to be very similar to SEO firms. And the reason for that, I believe, is because a lot of SEO companies, there was a time when a press release was a good SEO strategy. It just isn't now. It was then. And so the PR industry didn't jump on it early on, but the SEO industry did. And we did get a flood of very spammy called press releases. And so unfortunately that has kind of packaged us with the SEO industry in Google's view of the world. So what does make a Panda-friendly news release? Let's take a look at this. First and foremost, avoid any hint or even a sniff of duplicate content. So we often repurpose content. You take a news release and make a slide deck, and then you take that slide deck and make it into a video, or you take all the information in a press release and turn it into an infographic, or data from a white paper and then you make an infographic and you write a release about it, or you make Instagram posts from the images, so on. But you can't just make them all the same anymore. Because even though it's a different format, Google is going, no, we've seen this, we don't want this, thank you very much. So don't even use the same headline. You've got to change it at least 25%. Yes, it's a little more work, but it's all then going to be visible, and it's going to be found, and it's going to be shared. So it's way worth the extra time. Doug?
Yeah, there's a couple things I'd add to that are kind of common mistakes and people don't really think about sometimes. So you mentioned videos. One of the things that people often do is if you're doing a video in conjunction with a press release, it used to be a good practice to basically copy and paste the entire content of the press release into the description of the video. About, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so ago, that quit working, and that became all of a sudden duplicate content, and neither the press release nor the video would rank any longer. So so you just can't say enough about that duplicate content thing. One of the things that we've done at Newswire to kind of help on that count, and it's made a pretty big difference, is we've started using iframes for a lot of the duplicative content on any press release, so that from what Google sees, it's only on Newswire one time. And by what I mean by that is, for example, and I don't want to get too far into the particularities of Newswire, but you know, the videos and the pictures and all the things that you can put in the sidebar of a Newswire press release are now iframed into that, so it's not part of the content that Google indexes. The same with the About Us information in the footer of the press release. So that information on Newswire is only there one time, and then it's just represented as an iframe into the article. That may be a little technical for our audience here, and I'm not sure everybody knows exactly what I mean by that, but what it means is that that although you may have written about ABC Company 100 times and have used the About Us information 100 times, as far as Google is concerned, it only exists one time on Newswire, and we just basically put a little window in the press release that reflects that information back. So duplicate content is absolutely a killer, and we actually have a little higher standard than the 25% even, and we've done everything that we can to make sure that if you write about the same company multiple times, that we just show Google one instance of that, and it's not shown every time with your article, even though it appears to your reader in the article every time. Does that make sense?
That's smart. I didn't know that.
Well, there you go.
There you go. You see, you learn something every time. So, you can't use other people's content verbatim. No scraping, no copying and pasting. It is okay to reference other content, obviously, but it has to be very clear that this is somebody else's content. So either summarize it in your own words or actually put the quotes there, and be very sure to say, I got this from Doug Brown at Newswire, and this is where I got it, and here's the link to the original. Because they are running these checks to see, and if you just went, oh, that looks like a nice paragraph, copy paste, you cannot do that.
And I'll just expand on that a little bit. Google does seem to give a little bit of leeway when things are in quote marks. So if you're taking a quote, make sure that it's quoted, make sure that it's referenced, and that generally will not count against you as duplicate content. Now, all the things we're saying about original content, the rest of it is the length and the amount of original content there. So even though, for example, a quote may not count against you, if you have a 350-word press release and 150 of those 300 words are a quote, then you've got another kind of problem. So, I mean, even though, you know, you don't have a lot of quoted content, you know, you don't have a lot of original content either. So you have to look at it kind of as a percentage, like Sally had in that previous slide, and that is that, you know, you need to make sure that you have a substantial amount of original content, and if you, especially if you want to put a substantial amount of quoted or reference content in there, you still need to make sure that you have plenty, and by plenty I mean maybe 500 words or more, and that's another thing we could talk about. I don't know if you're getting into that, but we definitely see that longer articles are ranking better in Google right now. Kind of the standard used to be 500 words, but we're definitely seeing that articles with over 1,000 words will consistently outrank an article that is 500 words or less.
Okay, there are a couple of questions here I want to address. Annette was asking exactly what is it that was dropping on the graphs that we saw. Annette, it's traffic to the site, which indicates how much traffic is coming because they're being seen in the search engine, in Google. So if you're on first page, carry on, Dad.
Let me define that a little bit better. It's actually page views.
Right.
So, which is kind of the same thing, but not exactly the same thing. So it's how many times somebody called up a page on those sites. So that is kind of traffic to the site, but it's also kind of different because it's, you know.
How many pages did somebody view? Yeah.
Right.
And the reason why we can correlate that to Panda 4 is because that stat is coming from the fact of where they rank. If you do a search for left-hand blue threaded widgets and a press release shows up on page 1, you can tell from the analytics that there's a lot of traffic coming from that specific press release, and then how long they stay on the site and how many pages do they view. And if that suddenly disappears, then your page views go down because the press releases are not being seen, or the PR Web or PR Newswire or Business Wire or whatever site is not showing up anymore when you do searches. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and it's kind of a it's a little bit of a stretch in logic, but the thing that is clear is that on May 20th, when these results or when these releases came out, when Panda 4 and the rest came out at the same time, so what you're seeing is a drop in traffic to some of these press release sites, that started on that day. So I mean, then you have to just kind of go backwards and say, well, why did it drop? And that's what we've done is gone back and started looking at individual press releases and how they rank. So we have stats that, for example, tell us how many things that we have are in the first place for Google search and the first page and all those kind of things. And we've tried to monitor that and see what the changes are if our average release is ranking in a different place than it was before. And what we've seen is that our average has remained about the same, but that's only on an average again. So some things are up and some things are down.
Okay, good. And Valerie, I don't have stats for MarketWired. I haven't seen them anywhere, so I can't answer that one. And Bob has a question, does the same go for blog posts? Yes, goes for all content. If your blog post was on page 1 for a specific search term, and your blog for some reason is now considered to have thin content, you may find that your search ranking for your blog is disappearing, at which point you will also see a drop in page views on your blog. You must be watching your Google Analytics. That's a whole nother webinar. We have done that one before, but I can't emphasize enough how important it is for PR people to learn to use and interpret analytics. It's really, the answers are all in the analytics. We wouldn't know any of this if somebody wasn't watching the analytics, right, Doug?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
And of course, that's what we do and everybody else does. I mean, you definitely watch your stuff. That's how we evaluate ourselves and see what's going on. Now, and to answer that blog post thing, it may or may not be the case. So there's a lot of thought that there was manual action. In other words, not just an algorithmic change at Google, but that Google has a list of press release sites that it started applying a little bit different rule to. So there was definitely a change that could have affected your blog post, and again, it would be the same standard, thin content. But I think there's also a reason to believe that several of the press release sites are now having to live to a different standard than the normal blog.
Mm-hmm. So Molly has this question. She says her site wasn't penalized, but we do push our press releases out through sites like PR Newswire. Do you foresee Google penalizing the websites that use press release distribution sites? No, I don't think so. I don't think they'll track back and then penalize your site based on that. They look at your site as an individual thing and what you do on your site. It's just the actual news content that you put on PR Newswire must conform to these things we're talking about now to be Panda-friendly content. What do you say, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, I would just, I'm sure if you're using PR Newswire, you're probably following your results there and seeing how your stuff's ranking. So, I mean, I think you can kind of self-analyze. PR Newswire is, I think, definitely one of the sites that suffered the most, and you just have to look and see if your pages are doing better or worse there. If they're doing worse there, you might want to kind of evaluate the quality of your content or look for another outlet. So PR Web and PR Newswire, Business Wire are the three that got crushed. And like I say, I think that there's a lot of reason to believe that there was a manual action there, that those places that were full of that bad content took a bigger hit than most other places.
Right. Valerie, I think you and I must talk offline about advice. I can certainly help you there. I just don't want to have to go into it here. And then, Jeannie, what is an iframe? As Doug was saying, it is a little technical, but it's a way to post something online in its own little frame, so to speak, and we can see it on the external facing, like when you're looking at a website, the viewer can see it. But when Google comes in the back end and all their little spiders and robots go through all the code, they won't see it. So it hides really what's in there from Google, and that would be why on a press release where you have about my company and you have that in every single press release, and on the side you have all the about. If you keep putting that on every press release and it shows up on a newswire like PR Web or whatever, or Newswire, then Google is going to see that every time, and they will start to see it as duplicate content, which is why Newswire puts it in an iframe so that the reader sees it, but Google doesn't see it.
Let me make, I've got a good analogy if you would like me to give you an analogy for an iframe. Yeah?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So an iframe, think of an iframe as a window through one web page to another web page. So here's an example. Let's say that you're in an office building with 10 rooms in it, and all of 10 rooms have a window out into the parking lot, and there's a red Ferrari in that parking lot. So every room that you go into has a wall with all sorts of content on it, and you can think about that room and the wall in the room as being the same as a web page. And every room in that office has a window that you can see the red Ferrari through. So that's what an iframe is. It's a window into another page, basically, where you're seeing the red Ferrari. In this case, you're seeing the About Us information of that company. So you're looking at 10 different walls, for example, 10 different web pages, but they all have a window through them to see some other piece of content. In this case, a red Ferrari, or in a real world, it would be maybe the video or the image or the About Us information of the company. So there's only one instance of that information about the company that can be seen through a window in 10 different spots or on 10 different pages. I hope that makes sense.
Cool. All right. So let's go back to what makes a Panda-friendly news release. So if you do syndicate your content on other blogs or news sites, make sure that each one is 25% different. Or, Doug, you want it even more. Vary the headlines and the text. Yeah, go ahead.
So we will only publish something that is 65% unique. In other words, if we, when we look around, when something's submitted to us and we look around the web and see for, look for other copies of that content, if there's something that is even 40% the same, we won't publish it. So we have a lot higher standard than what you're putting out there. Okay. And again, that's probably why we survive so well.
Right, exactly. And write longer content. Google is really looking for, do you know what this is about? Do you have something to say? They look at everything that's on your site. Do you publish regularly and often on this topic? Do you really have in-depth knowledge? So that's the opposite of thin. Would we call it fat content? I don't know. We've never heard that, but it is the opposite of thin content.
Quality content would be the opposite.
Right.
And let me point out here that is something that people don't think about a lot of times, and that is that images are content.
Right.
So if you're using the same image over and over again, you've got a duplicate content problem, even though the words may be different around it. Think about the amount of information that's in an image. If you've ever if you've ever misdone an image in an email, you can see that there's literally tens of thousands of pieces of information that make up an image. And think about that, if you're duplicating that, how that would dwarf the 500 words that are unique. So original images, if you're putting an image in, it better be original.
Exactly.
Or iframed.
Yes. So you definitely want to use images because Google is looking for good original visual content. So you can add images, infographics, charts, slide decks. You can get into video, little vines and Instagrams, put them on YouTube, embed them from YouTube. So you see here, this is what we're talking about. On the left here, on this Newswire release, you see a video, and then in the middle you see a picture. Now that video on the left there would be in an iframe, so Google won't see it, but your readers will see it. Is that right, Doug?
That's correct. So everything on the left there in your representation there is in an iframe. So
Right.
So that's a great place to duplicate information, because there's, again, it's the Ferrari in the parking lot. It's only being seen, there's only one instance of it, even though there's a window to it from this article.
Right. Now, let me ask you a question. If you have a video that is relevant to your press release, but it's not just a complete regurgitation of what's in the press release, and I want Google to see it, then where would I put it?
You would put it in the article body.
Okay.
So if it was something that you'd only use one time, you would place it in the article body instead of that picture, maybe.
Okay, cool.
Or in addition to the picture.
Right. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, Doug, is when I look at Newswire, it looks more like a media site or a magazine site as compared to that, which to me looks more just like a list of news releases. Do you think that that makes a difference?
Yeah, I do think it makes a difference. There's a lot of great things about Newswire, and it's hard to sometimes decide exactly why things work the way they work. But compared to the other sites, we have about 3 times the time on site. We have about twice or 3 times the page views when somebody comes to the site, and we have about half of the bounce rate. And the reason that I think that is true is because of the way that we distribute and display these images.
Right.
The other thing that I think is really important when you're looking at a page like this is, and again, this is why images are so important. We are not trying to be the image police, but if you look at that page that you have up, probably everybody here can say where their eye goes and what's interesting on that page and what's not. And the stuff that is generally not very interesting are logos or things that have a lot of words in them. They're kind of unreadable.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's why we like that little pin style, is what we call that, and
Right.
We think that's one of the things that contributes to the engagement of the viewer. So I mean, the thing that we try to accomplish at Newswire with that is when someone comes to Newswire for a search that may be completely unrelated to you, we want them to stay and read your article. So if you have a good headline and a good image, you may get people reading. You will get people reading your articles, and that came on a different search because they find your content interesting.
Mm.
So that's our goal in Newswire. We can do what we can to help show your stuff and make sure that Google finds your stuff to the extent possible by just conforming with every possible thing that we think Google wants.
Right.
But over and above that, we try and engage our readers and keep them reading around, and hopefully they browse and find your content.
Cool. And by the way, the same will apply to your online newsroom. If your online newsroom is just a list of text press releases, and Lord forbid they're in PDFs, it's really time to start thinking about upgrading and creating a visual newsroom that has good SEO value, so that when people search, they will find your press releases, and if they search your brand, your newsroom will show up as the second result right after your website. So here are some of the things and the ways that you can, when you put into Newswire, I just wanted to show you there's SEO tools that you can use. And then there's this little iframe builder. You can put in a video, you can add a Google map, you can even add Facebook, or you can add AdSense ads to the side. So there's no need to get advertorial in the press release. You can actually add an advertisement on the left-hand side, and it won't ever get seen by Google because it's in the iframe. So here's an example. You see this one here on the left has their Facebook and the little friends. And then this is on the right, the about. So that's how it would work. So I wanted to show you also. Carry on, Doug.
Yeah, back up to that one again. And so again, the point there is that the stuff on the right and the left, there's only one instance of that on Newswire.
Right.
And then you just have a window to it. So in terms of what your readers see, they see all the things you want them to see. In terms of what Google sees, they see one instance of David Lerner and Associates About Us information, even if you've written 1,000 articles about them. They see one instance of your Facebook page, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool. So just looking at duplicate content and still repurposing. So the press release was 4 retirement saving tips for millennials. The slide deck was 4 financial strategies for young adults. In the newsroom, it's 4 personal finance tips for new college graduates. So you see what I mean? The basis of it is still the same. It doesn't take long to change it, even to 50% different. If you have, it's the same message you're getting across, you're just writing it differently. Then these things will be seen as individual pieces of content. So that's what you need to do. Let's just check if we have any more questions. Oh, where did it go? That wasn't really what I intended to do at all. Let me go back and look for them. Okay, here we go. So Panda frowns on stock photography. I would say so, unless you're going to make a little effort to change it in some way. If you're familiar with using a tool like PicMonkey, you don't have to learn to use Photoshop and be a whole desktop publishing guru. PicMonkey is absolutely incredible. The paid version is something like $30 for the whole year. And you can do pretty much a lot of things that you could do in Photoshop. I love PicMonkey. You can do overlays, you can change things, you can put text on it. So you can start with a stock image and make it into an original image. Any comment, Doug? Doug, are you there? Did I lose you? What happened?
And drag it into the search function in Google image search. Google will find other instances, so they can tell you if it's, if you've done enough to make it unique. My favorite trick, by the way, in terms of making a unique image, especially if you have video from the client, is just to basically play the video and take a screenshot of some frame in the video.
Right.
You can have a 3-minute video about a client and literally have tens of thousands of unique images that you can pull out of a video by just taking screenshots. So that's a very simple way to do it and make acceptable, great, unique images.
Let me see if I understand this question. No, Valerie, that picture, if it is totally just stock art, then it wouldn't count as original content unless we did something to it to make it so, as we were just saying. And then the next question, people pay good money for infographics. You want multiple uses. So if it gets earned content, is that considered duplicate? If it gets picked up on its own value, say you make an infographic, you post it on your blog and you put it on visually, and other people pick it up and post it, Google has said they really understand the value of news and the fact that it does get pickup. If it gets genuine pickup of its own value, then they don't regard it as duplicate content. It's when you're doing something to put it somewhere where you're paying for it to be syndicated. So, for instance, you put something onto a newswire and it automatically, verbatim, shows up on MarketWatch, this one, that one, that one, that one. They know that those media companies didn't publish that of their own accord because it was great content. It's a paid service. They do it anyway. You could write whatever trashy thing you like. If you pay it and you put it on there, it will show up in Yahoo Finance. But if you make a great infographic and you post it on visually and 20 other bloggers go, oh my God, that's the best thing I've seen, and they post it, Google totally knows when your content is being earned. And a question on my go-to photo source is Fotolia. F-O-T-O, Fotolia. Yeah, it's an F-O-T-O-L-I-A. Do you have anyone you like best, Doug?
Like I said, my go-to way is to get some video and pluck pictures out of a video. You're so much better off using a unique image than a stock image, even if the stock image appears to be visually, better, which that's why people use stock images. You're still better off with with original images. So what I always suggest is that anytime one of our reporters goes to any client, you take a camera.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Parking lot shots. Take 20 shots of the inside of the building, 20 shots of the people. Take all the video and photos that you can, so that you have just a tremendous wealth and resource of things from all your clients. Because I just can't overemphasize the fact that images are content, and if you reuse them or worse, use stuff from stock sites, you're just reusing something that's been used however many times on the web. So it's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but it's worth it.
So does Google notice if the content is shared on social sites? They absolutely do. Social signals and social proof is part of their algorithm now. And it doesn't even have to have a link. It just has to have what Google calls a citation. So as long as you were mentioned, they're smart enough now to know. So, and it does have an impact. It totally does. And Bob's question.
Social signals are the most important thing I think there is right now in terms of, a few years ago you would have said, no, you need to build links. You build links to this and links to that and links to your press releases and links to your sites. And the value of links has certainly diminished, and the relevance of social shares has become bigger and bigger and bigger and better and better and better. So one of the things we recommend, everybody seems to kind of focus on the top 4 or 5 social sites. There's 50 social sites nowadays, and all of them have some relevance. So using tools like IFTTT or OnlyWire or lots of different tools out there to kind of help Hootsuite's another one, but anytime you create content, you need to push it out to all of your social networks. And if you only have 4 or 5 social networks, you need to get on the stick and get 30 or 40 or 50 social networks going.
Right. Do you want to type in the chat the names that you just gave?
Yes.
Clients don't always have photos, which is why it's a big issue. Yeah, so that's what Doug was saying. You don't go anywhere, well, you don't go anywhere without your phone. Your phone probably has a really great camera in it. You can take the most amazing photographs, I have to tell you, with a phone. Get the book called iPhonography Art, something like that. It's how to take incredible photographs with an iPhone. You can get lenses that you can put onto your phone. The little Sony little camera I've got that clips onto my Samsung. Incredible. You can just make the most amazing pictures like that right now. Take 10 beautiful pictures. You guys have to learn to be a one-man band. When you look at what journalism is doing, and like the Chicago Tribune fires all their videographers and photographers and gives cameras to the reporters and says, go and have at it. You guys have to do it. I'm afraid that's what we have to do. We've got to service those journalists that are dying for visual content. The more beautiful, amazing, appealing, original visual content you can make and put with your news releases in your newsroom is going to make a huge, huge difference. Do I recommend syndication services? Katie, email me about that. It's Sally at press-feed.com. I'll put it in the chat. Did I do that right? Yeah, okay. So the issue is clients where we are not. Yes, I totally get that. So what we've done is we train the clients. We train them using GoToMeeting or Skype or Adobe Chat or whatever. And we have trained a bunch of our clients to take pictures and take video. Then they load that and they send it to me and we edit them, and that's what we're doing. We have done that with a lot of clients. We also do visual training, visual content training classes. So we've on occasion have gone in-house to companies like Time Warner Cable and CPS Energy and others. And then we deliver sometimes a 2 or 3 day workshop on how to do this. Question from Jeannie, do you have to change social posts for different sites? Never mind for Google. You should be doing that anyway, because all these social sites have different communities. They have different demographics. So otherwise, you know what you're doing the old spray and pray, and it really doesn't work. You have a different audience on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, and they're there for different reasons. So yes, you should. That's why you need something like Hootsuite or the Meritus Digital Dashboard, so that you can load all the things in there that you need, and then you can just easily and quickly post to each one and change what you're posting. So I know this is a whole bunch of work, guys, but you know what? Since I've been doing it this way, particularly using a dashboard, I'm finding that I'm doing twice as much in half the time and getting way better results. It makes it so much easier. It is a pain in the butt to log in, log out. Oh my God, am I on the right one? Oh geez, I just tweeted something from the wrong account. I'm going to get fired. But if you have a great dashboard, it will monitor everything that's being said. It will manage all your interactions. you'll track everything, and it'll make it absolutely a piece of cake to do this. So that's one thing that I would recommend. Find a dashboard that really works for you. Right, so we're at the end of our hour. I want to say thank you very much to Doug for spending this hour with us and sharing his insights. So if anyone is interested in using Newswire, Doug, I know that they can only get in by invitation. So how are they going to get an invite? Do you want them to email me? Doug, have you run away? Or did he just put himself on mute again? Well, I guess he isn't talking to us.
Yeah, I muted myself. I'm sorry. I was typing into your little chat there those things, and by the way, the things I typed in are not seen by others. The way that you have me right now, it's just seen by you. So you or Joel need to repost that to everyone. Those little tools.
Okay, I can do that.
But the answer is yeah. If they would get in touch with you and you can recommend them to me, we'll be happy to take them.
All right. Cool, cool. So you can either use this one, info@press-feed.com, or just my personal one, Sally, S-A-L-L-Y, @press-feed.com. And we'll be more than happy to help you out with any questions that you had from the webinar, or any questions about your content, your newsrooms. If you have an old newsroom with just a list of text links, now's the time to start looking like a visual magazine. There's a post on my blog which is called proactivereport.com about why brands are using the new digital newsroom strategy so that their sites are beginning to look like Pinterest, basically. So there's a lot of data out there for you. I'll put that in here. There you go. All right. Thanks very much, guys. We'll see you again in about a month's time. Watch your email for the subject of our next webinar. Thanks for being with us this morning, and thank you to Doug. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks.